we may be rescheduling the former speaker if we can. He was very busy. So if you're just joining us, he obviously apologizes, but had some real surgeries to attend to. So today we had Motti, who is the executive director of the congregation Agdus Achim, and he will be sharing his insight into Israel and the coronavirus. So that's a topic that we're still kind of dealing with, and the next couple sessions will probably be talking about that same topic. So if it's okay, I'll pass it over to Motti, and I'll make sure everyone else is muted. But if you have a question, you can unmute yourself.
Hello? People, can you hear me?
Hello.
Yes.
Yep.
Good. Okay, so yesterday Orly told me to talk about the corona in Israel. She asked if I can, and you know, everything when you talk about in Israel, it's like crazy changing. So while we are talking, the Israeli cabinet minister are sitting and deciding what to do about the disasters that are going on in Israel, which is terrible. We are facing a jump in the corona sick. I think yesterday we had almost 4,000 people, and 3 days ago we had 2,000 people a day. Today we had 4,000 people, and for Israel's size, it's huge. We were kind of around the 400 for a long time, and then things totally went out of control. So I want to go back and describe a little bit what happened, and then I'll talk a little bit about the vaccines that Israel is developing, and we'll go from there. And if you have any questions, so you can interrupt me or you can ask afterwards. So Israel liked to be the first in everything. So we were the first. Israel was the first country in numbers of low corona in the first round, in the first wave. Israel had a shelter in place pretty quick, almost in, I think it was the 10th of February, when nobody in the world even started. Israel immediately put shelter in place for people from Europe. Actually, for those of you who know me, you know the stories that my kids were coming back from a ski in Spain, in Andorra, and they were sheltered in their home for two weeks when nobody really know yet about shelter in. And since then, Israel entered to a shelter in place, which kept the corona very, very low. And the death rate was about 200 to 300 people on the first wave. In about the end of April, like towards the 25th of April, they decided to open back the school after Passover holiday. And when they opened the school, within a week, things became really bad. And then there was also a political change that influenced a lot of what's going on with the corona. And I want to kind of linger a little bit on this. In the first wave of corona, Israel was acting under Benjamin Netanyahu transferable government, a government that was not really got elected, a government that fell in the Knesset, but it was before election day. So we had like 3-month gap between the time that the government fell and the new election that form a new government. In those 3 months, the government could decide whatever they want almost automatically. And there was no Knesset because the Knesset was sproused, like the Knesset basically was closed. So the minister were making all the decision, and the pressure that one could put was relatively low, and therefore things have been decided pretty quick. And after the decision, the action was pretty quick. Israel opened tons of hotels, took people that got sick out of their home, let them live in hotels, isolated them, and kept the numbers very low. In the next wave, in the second wave that we call it in Israel, we were facing exactly when the new government formed. It is a huge government. We're talking about 36 cabinet ministry with many, many people, and everybody's pulling in its own direction. And also the burden on the Israeli economy became such that everybody was pushing to not close and not to put shelter in, and Israelis by nature, and I think also the climate in Israel, that it's hot and everybody's is like, it's a warm society of people that touching and going and whatever, and people entering to the houses of people more than what you would imagine in Sweden, make it so bad. So a little bit about the number. I said we are now facing a huge number. Every time that and Israel, after 2 weeks of debate, decided to appoint a corona czar that will basically, it's a Professor Ronnie Gamzu, that was the head of the big hospital in Israel. He surrounded himself with some consultants that are all professor, doctors, statisticians, and try to figure out what's the best way to do and to handle. And they bringing a recommendation to the government, and the government has been pushed to all kind of directions. So where are the push coming from? Let's start with the ultra-Orthodox. First of all, I want to say that till about last week, the corona in Israel, as high as it was, it's really concentrated in 2 areas. In the area of the ultra-Orthodox community and in the area of the Arab community. Now, what's really special about those 2 groups? It's pretty easy. They are relatively poor. The people living in a small apartment, many people, because Arab family and ultra-Orthodox family have many children. They're living in a very condensed area, and therefore the corona can flourish and move from one person to another very easily. And they also a bit suspicious towards the authorities, the government, and what you call it. So they really pushing in the coalition, not especially the ultra-Orthodox, not to do whatever they want. So this is one area that's going on. In another area that we have issues are, because we are a democratic state, and because in Israel the rights to demonstrate is a big right, so nobody wanted to stop people from demonstrate. Since the election, there is a lot of demonstration around the Prime Minister's house to call upon Benjamin Netanyahu to resign because of all the corruption and the trial that he's going into, etc. And this is different people. This is people from the left, usually from Tel Aviv, from more affluent areas. They come there, they get very close to each other, and it doesn't look good. And that's another source of spread of the corona. And add to this the fact that because Israel was relatively successful in the first wave, people got the confidence that it won't be so bad. So there was a relaxation of the limitation. So even my daughter, for example, Shani, works in a high-tech company in Herzliya, and the way she described it, when she stepped into the building, corona dead. So basically, they're all 20, 30 years old kids, and they think that corona will not impact them and not influence them, and therefore they don't put masks, and they're living the life of the 20, 30 years old, no worried about what will happen. So between the condensed area of the ultra-Orthodox, the condensed area of the Arab, the suspicious towards the authority, the demonstration against Netanyahu from the left, and the youngsters that are not really following the rule, Israel is facing a disaster. Having said that, Israel so a little bit more about the number, and then I'll open it for a question. Israel, as of 2 days ago, we passed the 1,000 number of deaths in Israel. So as of today, I think we have about 1,030 people dead from corona. The number are probably going to go high dramatically in the next 2 weeks because we're getting a lot of sick people. But as of now, 1,000 people. Now, just to compare it, I think Georgia is almost at 7,000, and Georgia is about the size of Israel. Israel might be a little bit more condensed than Georgia, but in population, we are about the same. Maybe Israel is a little bit bigger. So when you compare it to Georgia, the death rate in Georgia is about 6.5 times more than Israel. The sick people in Israel is about the same as Georgia. which tells you a little bit about the success of the Israeli medical institute, hospital, Kupot Cholim, etc., to handle the situation quite well. Add to this the fact that Israel is relatively a younger society, so even if people getting sick, there is more chance of them to recover, you're getting a lower number. This is all very nice as of the past. I'm not sure that the future will be the same because, as I explained, the number are really skyrocketing. While we are talking, the Israeli cabinet is sitting and probably deciding to go for a shelter in place for the high holiday starting from probably next Tuesday, just before Rosh Hashanah. And they're talking about a month. Of course, there is a huge pressure from the Minister of Finance not to allow it, from the ultra-Orthodox not to allow it because they want people to go to shuls, etc., etc., etc. Every sector is claiming that he's doing everything possible, but what I see as a little bit of an outsider, everybody is looking in his own field and doesn't really see the big picture. And you know, I'm sure you heard about the story of two people going on a boat, and one is drilling a little hole in his side of the boat, and the other said, "What are you doing?" He said, "It's not your problem, it's my side of the boat." Well, you can do this. So that's where we are in Israel. Unfortunately, it's not as good as it was in the first wave. Luckily, the number of deaths are still relatively very low. As of the vaccine, as of today, Israel started the stage 3 of the vaccine, which means trying to give the shot to people. We're starting with 100 youngsters that are prone to be more resilient to side effect. And if everything will go well, in 2-3 weeks, we'll go to a much bigger, Israel will go to a much bigger experiment. The Biological Institute of Nes Ziona is the one who is leading it. It's very similar to the Moderna's vaccine in the way that it works, but it's a total Israeli invention. A month ago, the head of the research said that he hoped to have the vaccine ready for all Israeli by April, May, and everybody said, "Oh, by April, May, we probably will be behind it." And everybody was thinking that between AstraZeneca from London and Moderna from Boston, we'll have vaccine by Christmas. Now, April seems to be a good time, and that's where we are. All right, so that's the briefing in 13 minutes, and if anyone has any question, please do. Hello, people?
I have a question, Motti. A lot of us, it's Carol, can you hear me?
Yes.
A lot of us have been supporting hospitals and medical research in Israel for a very long time, not only through Hadassah, but also Shir Zedek and some of the other hospitals around. Is there any advantage to the fact that Israel already has so much money that is designated for research? Is there any possibility that they're going to get a little further along with the vaccine or with some type of virus protection that we just don't have access to here in the United States because we are so caught up with lack of funding?
Well, it's the factor totally the other way around. Israel funding for research is ridiculous in comparison to the United States. The United States still has way more money for research from private organization, from a private company, even from government. The American government poured money for the vaccine, the COVID vaccine, like crazy. I mean, Israel is working on pennies compared to the money. So the money that we are giving to Hadassah as a Hadassah supporter or Shaarei Tzedek is usually go to the hospital itself and not to research. The money that goes to research is basically government money, and Israel is very low on this. So we do what we do with no money and almost in a miraculous way. Israel has a lot of knowledge. The head of Moderna is an Israeli guy. The head of, I think the main researcher, all Hadassah doctor and people that were grew up in School of Medicine of Hebrew, which is basically Hadassah. But when it's come to research in Israel, budget, no, we don't have money. American Jewry, the money that American Jewry gives, it's in the fringes. It's maybe coming up to $30 to $40 million, and we're talking about billions here, unfortunately.
Motti, I heard that the virus now is a big problem in Gaza. Is Israel at all helping?
Oh yeah, of course. So everything in Gaza is coming. Everything in Gaza and more in Judah and Samaria are coming from Israel. In Gaza, it's a little bit separated. Israel is really helping with equipment through Qatar. Qatar is basically providing the equipment and the money for the Gazian, and the Hamas is kind of playing a little bit with it. And now it's going, but about a week ago, the Hamas stopped allowing the Qatarian to transfer equipment to Israel in an attempt to pressure Israel and the world. And there is this dynamic, you know, that now and again, the Hamas will do something to do, but Israel is basically not doing direct support, but they're doing indirect support. And in really terrible cases, they transferring sick people to Israel. In Judah and Samaria, it's totally opposite. Judah and Samaria are using all the Israeli hospital, especially in the one, especially Hadassah Mount Corpus Hospital is basically hospital that serves the Palestinian. Most of the patients there are Palestinians or from East Jerusalem or from Judah and Samaria. Hospital in Afula is getting refugees from Syria, getting refugees in Tzfat, both getting refugees from Syria and from the Palestinian Authority, yes.
Motti, this is Janet. I have a question based on something you said earlier. The last number of months, 6 months or so, has the religious establishment in Israel treated synagogue service the way we have here with all virtual services? And if not, because you said they're considering putting in a new shelter in place next week, right before the high holidays. So are they preparing to do what we've already all been planning on doing here in the States, continuing virtual services for the holidays?
Well, no. Well, you kind of ask many questions in one time. So I'll answer the last one and we'll go from the rest. So Zoom is not acceptable according to the Orthodoxy, definitely not the ultra-Orthodoxy. Some modern Orthodox allow Zoom on Yom Tov, but not on Shabbat. And there is a very nuances difference in between Yom Tov and Shabbat. Yom Tov, I mean a holiday versus Shabbat. Now, when I'm talking about holiday, it does not include Yom Kippur, but it will include Passover or Rosh Hashanah or those days. So some very, very liberal Orthodox will allow maybe on the second day of Rosh Hashanah, Zoom under a few circumstances that you had it before, etc., etc. It's really more common among Moroccan Jews because the idea of using electricity on Yom Tov was a little bit loose among the Moroccan community. But when it comes to the ultra-Orthodox, all of them do not accept Zoom and they are not going to use them for services. So that's the last question. As of your first question, I kind of hinted towards this and I want to elaborate a little bit. So at the first wave, the ultra-Orthodox community immediately, a little bit even more than in America, immediately accept the idea that pikuach nefesh is the first thing that we need to be concerned about, that for sake of life, we should do anything possible, and they really did not violate the sheltering, they did not violate anything, and they tried to do anything possible to try to save lives. The problem that's happening now in the second wave is that everybody's looking and seeing what the others do, and everybody's feeling that they are doing too much and the rest are not doing anything. And the ultra-Orthodox people feeling that it's not fair for them to do if the others are not doing. It's not fair to open school or universities and not to open yeshiva. So if my kids are required to come to do testing in their university, if it's Tel Aviv University or if it's Bar Ilan University, why the kids in the yeshiva will not go? Also, because the way that things are handled in Israel, and there's so much of lack of trust now. So everybody thinks that he knows better. So many yeshivot, what they try to do, they try to create a bubble. What does it mean, a bubble? When the study started after the month of Elul, they invited people, like they kind of started the studying in rooms of 4 people. And those 4, after 2 weeks, entered to a group of 20, and this group of 20 and entered to a group of 50. And the idea was that they would not leave the yeshiva, and slowly they will create a bubble within the yeshiva. That was the common practice in most of the yeshivot. The problem with it was that the kids, especially the young bachurim that are the young couples that are not staying to sleep in the yeshiva, went home and in and out and kind of broke the cycle, and it didn't work. So I think that, to answer your question, I think that the ultra-Orthodox are facing bigger challenge that we are. If Eva and I are living in Habersham Wood or in Kensington Park in a house that is half an acre, and we have 5 bedrooms, and we can, if we hate each other, we can go to 2 sides of the house and stay there for the rest of our life, and nobody will notice us. When you are a ultra-Orthodox family with 8 to 10 kids, and you're living in 800, 900 square foot apartment, it's tough. There is no shortcut here. And that's what Israel is facing with the Orthodox. Add to this the fact that they really feeling that everybody is on them, that as much as they're trying, people are thinking that they are not. So it's kind of creating this animosity that is really not good. Generally speaking, you all know that the value of saving life is very important, and especially it's important for religious people, and therefore everything is kosher to save life. The question is, do we save life by doing what we need to do? And that's where the trouble starts. Did I answer your question?
Motti?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we are hearing you.
Are there any statistics about the cases in the second wave in the ultra-Orthodox community as opposed to the rest of Israel?
Yeah. So we know
the conflicts and all that, but are there any statistics to back up that the ultra-Orthodox community in the second wave is having more cases than the rest of Israel?
Yeah, Aaron, I understand. So what I'm saying is true for about 4 days ago, because things changed really dramatic in the last 4 days. But till 4 days ago, the numbers of sick people in the cities of Elad, Bnei Brak, and few other cities were much bigger than in the secular city. When we're talking about secular city, we usually talk about Tel Aviv, maybe Haifa, not the Arab section of Haifa. Jerusalem, the ultra-Orthodox neighborhood, also facing way higher numbers than the neighborhood in the south of Jerusalem, where more like Bet Hakerem and those neighborhoods. So you can see that it's really, the numbers are going by neighborhood. If you'll open the statistic map of where the sick people in Israel, you'll see that wherever there is ultra-Orthodox families, the number are higher. And yeah, that's a fact. Things have been changing dramatically in the last 4 days for many reasons. Mainly, there was 2 big mega event of partying in Tel Aviv that created a problem. There was few weddings that shouldn't have taken place, and things like this. But yes.
Thank you.
David, you're muted. I see you talking, but you're muted.
Okay. Motti, is the development of the vaccine being done by individual companies, or is it being coordinated through the government by one company?
Well, there's only one company in Israel that really works. It's the Amachona. It's called the Nes Ziona Technological Institute. It's basically under the Israeli Ministry of Security. It's part of the bodies that does all the anti-war, chemical war equipment. Yes, it's government. It's totally government. It's actually more than government. It's Israeli army.
What's happening with the army? Are they getting the? Are they getting the virus in the army?
So the army is a little bit more careful. There was here and there a few, spread. Last week there was a spread in Bad Echad. Bad Echad is the school for officers, where 40 officers have been put in isolation. Some of them were sick, but usually in the army we're dealing with very young people. So even if they get sick, they go to 2 weeks of quarantine, and before the 21st 4 hours pass, they're feeling better. So that's how it goes. Am can tell you that her granddaughter started the Israeli army, and she was put into quarantine to make sure that she's not going to harm anyone. I can tell you that all my family people were, instead of coming home every Shabbat now, they're coming every 2 weeks, and the army is trying to keep as low as possible the holiday and the separation between the army in and out. And when they are not out, it's pretty good. When they go out, who knows? Last week there was a part, they call it a nature party, a party in the forest near Modi'in with kids up on Saturday night, and not just that there was a spread of corona there was also one kid that got too much to drink and died from overdose of alcohol.
It's Carol again. Sorry, I can't get my picture there. I've heard some bizarre things from both end spectrum of my friends, but they're talking like end of days kinds of, Mashiach is coming because there's this plague and because there's this happening and that happening. In Israel, are there a lot of people that are either panicking or promoting some line of reasoning that we have to do certain things because we brought a plague upon us?
I didn't hear anything, and no, I wouldn't say so. I wouldn't say so. I actually feel like it won't be bad if the Israeli will panic a little bit. It seems that the Israelis are keeping a little bit too cool towards what's happening. I mean, watching what's happening in the last 2 weeks from here, it's terrible. And I just don't see the Israelis getting too excited about it. And that's a problem. And I'm not sure that that's really what you asked, Carol. It seems to me that you ask a little bit more about religious, messianic, whatever. Yes. So no, I didn't read or saw anything special about it. Of course, there is this big things there is a tradition among the Hasidim of Breslev to go to Uman, where the Rebbe from Breslev is buried. Yes. On the time before Shoshana and Yom Kippur.
Right.
The reason for this is because the Rebbe promised that everyone that comes to visit him before Yom Kippur, he will pull him out from Gehenom, from hell. So there is this tradition of going there, and it has been like this for the last 20 years. And the government, Netanyahu and Ronnie Gamzo, the czar of the corona, really appealed the Ukrainian government not to allow the Hasidim to go there. They also try to stop flying there, and they're doing everything that they possible because there is many Hasidim that wanted to go there with the belief that this will help shortening the plague. So there is this phenomena around this, but it has to do more with the fact that the Hasidim are usually going around high holiday to the grave of the Rebbe. The main thing that maybe I neglected to say, the main thing that Israel is all the time concerned is not to get to a point where the hospital cannot serve the people. And the number, the red number that was mentioned was 800. We are now 800 heavily sick people, 800 in what we call critical condition, maybe I would use the word. So we are now at 474. But unfortunately, between 474 and 800, it doesn't take too long because the growth of the corona, when it's starting a wave, it's usually exponential. So as I explained you, if a week ago we were at 2,000 people sick a day, now we are at 4,000 people sick a day. So when the heavily sick people, the ones who are hospitalized, will start to grow dramatically, it will be a disaster. So basically, that's what the government is worried about. We don't want to cross the number, the red number of 800. If we cross this number, hospital will not be able to give the ultimate service, and we'll start to have to choose between, who gets the service and all kind of things that we don't want to do.
Are you just talking about all the hospitals throughout Israel or just in like
All the
Jerusalem?
hospital around Israel.
Only 800 can be
Yes, yes.
total?
Israel is a very small country, Penny.
What about all the
Um,
Hadassah hospitals? And I guess I just always picture them as being so large and having
Yeah,
so
Hadassah Hospital in Jerusalem is a very large hospital, and it might have 80 to 150, corona bed now. But if they get full capacity, that's where you are. I mean, how many beds do you think we have in Georgia?
I don't
I don't
know.
know that we have more than that.
I don't know.
800 is the number, the red dot number. That if we cross 800, the feeling of the Ministry of Health is that we won't be able to give the good service that we want to give.
I have another hospital logistics question. So, and this was recently on one of my Hadassah briefings again, is that they,
Louder, please.
I'm sorry, that the Enkerem Hospital was devoted to people who are sick, but also the COVID patients, and that the Mount Scopus Hospital was not taking any COVID patients. They were keeping their hospital open for women, Alzheimer's, childbirth, and and those types of health needs. But I also know that in times of extreme problems in Israel, can you not hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, in that the hospitals often triage outside, that they can use their facilities, but also their property for tent hospitals. Can that be done?
So,
the critical numbers?
Yes. So 800 is the number, the critical number. Of course, if Israel will go above 800, there are a lot of other solutions, but it won't be as good as. Okay. So if Hadassah, I'm not sure about what you said, but if you are right, and you might be right, that Hadassah Hospital decided strategically to have the all COVID patient in one place because it's easier for them. The distance in driving between Hadassah Mount Scopus and Hadassah Har HaTzofim is about 10 miles. So I'm sure it's not the end of the world. As for if it will be needed, yes. So all the hospitals already have tent for COVID and do triage and do all what they need to do for COVID. It doesn't mean that if we go above 800, we're raising our hand and we're saying go die, but it just means that we won't be able to give the same quality of service. That's all.
Great. Anyone else have any other questions for Motti? Yeah.
Okay, so
right.
I just want to take the opportunity to wish you all.
Arlene has her hand up.
Oh,
wait. Arlene has her
Arlene.
hand up. She's muted.
Oh, okay.
Let me find her. Hold on.
Arlene, you're muted.
Okay, yeah.
Arlene, you have to unmute.
Okay.
All right, now. Again. No, Arlene, you're still muted.
Hit the microphone up above, Arlene. Do you see the microphone with the red slash? Hit that. Yeah. Oh, well. I tried.
Okay.
Yeah, now we can hear you.
Okay.
Sorry.
Are there neighborhoods in Israel that are locked down because of Corona?
Yeah. So the government basically, as of the last 48 hours, they started to have a night lockdown in few areas in Israel. Well, in few areas, in 40 zones, in 40 locations. They are mainly Arab neighborhood and ultra-Orthodox neighborhood, but it really didn't change because very quickly we're seeing that it doesn't help. So they're talking now about putting a lockdown for all the country, maybe only at night, maybe between cities. It's unclear. The government is talking about it right now, but as of now, the lockdown is not all the time. The lockdown is between 5 o'clock in the evening till 7 o'clock in the morning. And the idea is that people will not get to do weddings. In the Muslim, this month for the Muslim is very good to do weddings. So one of the mega problem with there is that they insist of doing weddings, and those weddings are really a trouble. In the ultra-Orthodox community, because the standard of life that they live and the way that they live, really, they study all day long, they're starting to really socially live at night. So 5 o'clock, closing all the shop, closing all the things, it's going to make a big difference. So that's what the government tried to do. So far, it doesn't hold water. People just don't follow it, and you know, you can force, but you know how much you can force. What do? You started to arrest people, you started to give fine. What do you do? So when there is an atmosphere of enabling, you can do, but when everybody's trying to cheat the system, it just doesn't work. So that's where we are now.
Thank you.
So I might have missed this earlier, but with the ultra-Orthodox communities and I know they live in, I mean, I've been there in certain streets and I know how close everything is. So are they basically just not practicing social distancing and wearing masks?
No, that's not true at all. They are practicing social distancing and they are trying to do their best. Just what I was trying to emphasize is that their objective situation is much worse than our objective, okay? So as I said, you know, if Eva and I are living in a big house and we don't have children in the house and we basically 2 people spread in 2,000 square foot, and you have an ultra-Orthodox family that are 12 people spread in 800 square foot, and they don't have a yard, and because they're living in an apartment, and next door to them there is another family that is the same like them, their objective are much harder than my objective.
Okay.
When they go to do shopping, the line in the shopping is much bigger. When Benjamin Netanyahu said, why do we need to go to the supermarket every day? Why can people just order once every 10 days? So Aryeh Deri, an ultra-Orthodox minister, interior minister, he said, Bibi, you don't understand. In our family, you cannot go to buy every 10 days because we have 12 kids and some of them has kids, and you're feeding 50 people. You cannot go to the supermarket every day. You don't have enough refrigeration. You don't have enough oven. You just don't. So that's part of the difference in life, and it's just hard. In Israel, the ultra-Orthodox and the Arab are 2 societies that are much different than what our standard.
Right. No, I understand that. And it's like, I have a niece that lives in Tel Aviv, and I mean, they're under the philosophy there really is no pandemic. So they're young, and
right.
I don't.
So that's part of the other problem that I was mentioning. You know, you go to, as my daughter said, you go to her office and Corona dies when she's stepping into the building. Like, they think that it won't hurt them. They don't think about the older people that they might interact with. They don't think about, you know, they're just young and happy and going about their life. And
that's the difference. Thank you.
In this way, they are probably similar to our youngster.
Yes. Since she's from America originally.
Yesterday, I was swimming at the pool at the JA by myself. There was no one person, not one soul, but there was 2 lifeguards that for the 40 minutes that I was swimming did not even bother for one moment to put their mask on, both of them. So here you go. 2 very, very nice girls. I really sweet girls. They are not evil, but they were just, you know, living the life, you know. And it's kind of warm there, and maybe it's not so comfortable. So, you know.
I'll make a note of that. They should be wearing their mask.
No. I mean, that's not the point. I was just trying to. It's mentality, it's approach, is the ways that we feel about things, and I think we have an issue.
Right.
Part of the issue.
All right.
Right.
So if that's the end of it, I just want to take a chance to say Shana Tova to all of you. And we say in Hebrew, Tichle Shana ve'kilelotea v'tachel Shana in birkotea. We translate to end the year with all its cares and begin a year with all its blessing. And let us say Amen.